We'll begin our next panel session, Life Settlement Industry Awareness Perspectives from Market Participants. This session will feature Taylor Garvey from Air Asset Management, Clay Gibson from Treyled Life Settlements, and Perry Coons from Maple Life Financial. The session will be moderated by Stephen Shapiro of Q Capital Strategies. Thank you all for your time. Stephen, I'll pass to you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Well, everyone, welcome to Lisa's fall annual conference. Great panel today. We're going to discuss life settlement awareness and other relevant industry and market topics. We're pretty much the focus here that we're going to talk about is how do we drive industry growth today and set up the industry for the long term, for long-term growth in the future. To start, I'll go to my left. Why don't you each introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your company and what you do, and we'll go from there. Perry?
Great. Thanks, Steve. My name is Perry Coons. I am the president of Maple Life Financial. We are a licensed provider, purchaser of policies. I've been with Maple since 2004. We were actually, big news for us, recently acquired by the Cosmos management team, a longtime client of ours, and we continue to originate for both them and other institutional investors, and happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. Clay?
Yeah, Clay Gibson. I'm a managing partner at Treyled Life Settlements. We're a life settlement broker, and we really, I guess my perspective up here today from being a broker is really more, our client base is financial institutions, some of the larger brand name financial institutions, wealth advisors, CPAs, tax attorneys, and then it really kind of specializes more on the high net worth, ultra high net worth space.
Taylor.
Hi, Taylor Garvey. I'm with Air Asset Management. I am in marketing and corporate strategy. So lots of familiar faces out there. Some of you I haven't met. I'm excited to be here. Thank you to Lisa for hosting this. Air Asset Management is an asset manager primarily focused on investing in life settlements, but we also invest in annuities and private credit.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks, panelists. We have great representation here, provider, broker, fund manager, asset manager. So great perspectives here, and I'm going to start with an around-the-horn question. 3 words or less. I won't hold you to that, though. How would you characterize the state of the life settlement industry in 2025? Perry, you're to my left, so you're the first victim.
I'm going to say 3 words or less, difficult but optimistic.
All right, like it, love it, love it.
Playing the duality, but I hope that works.
Clay.
Let's see. Growing, curious, complex.
Okay, like it, like it. Taylor?
Consolidating, maturing, and dare I say misaligned.
Oh, ooh. You know what? I'm going off script. Taylor, I want to hear more about misaligned. I want to hear more about that.
So I'm coming from the asset manager perspective, and I think we are kind of where private credit was about 10 years ago, and that we've built a really strong foundation. We're reaching a place where we're coming together as an industry, but we still have room to grow from data, transparency, kind of the less lane perspective and more of a ecosystem perspective to grow.
Complex. I'm going to go back to complex also.
Complex.
No, I think that was you, Perry, wasn't it?
Perry?
No, it was Clay.
Yeah, I mean, complex, right. Some of the issues that we're going to be talking to today are about awareness. And I think, a lot of times we get so involved and understand this asset class so well that there's a lot of nuances to this industry. And it's not, for, some of the room, maybe, I don't, mean to step on your toes, but the direct-to-consumer marketing has done a pretty good job in the space of raising awareness. But I think the next step of awareness is having wealth advisors really understand our asset class and really word of mouth of growth and organic growth from showing them case studies, showing them how this product actually works as a sophisticated tool in their toolkit. And it's really about building trust, and there's complexity within the asset and how it works within their estate planning. And so it's really an educational process. And so when I say complex, that's what I mean. Like, we spend, while we are a broker and we spend a lot of time sending policies out to market, we spend more time educating wealth advisors and tax attorneys and estate planners about the life settlement option. And so that's kind of when I said complex, the first thing that comes to mind is they don't really understand the complexity of these transactions and what it's required to go through it. And so to me, where I think we've differentiated ourselves at Treyled from others is we bolt on our process to their existing organization. And that has created so much momentum and so much power when they say, we didn't really understand what we wanted to do with life settlements or how to really roll it out to our advisors. And so we've come in and said, this is our platform, this is our process, this is how you do it. And once we built that trust with them and helped them understand that it is a complex transaction, it does have a lot of nuances to it, but this is the process, it's really helped word of mouth and spread like wildfire through the financial institutions that we've worked with.
And Clay, not to silo off some of the things you said, but I think you touched on 3 different ways we can grow the market, right? There's disintermediation, direct-to-consumer, things of that nature. There's organic growth within existing channels. And then the thing I'm most excited about, which is brokers like yourself going into new channels. And that's the thing we really want to lean into as a provider. You know, we aren't doing the disintermediation strategy and going direct-to-consumer at this time, but we really want to give brokers, large agents, people who want to enter the business, the tools to figure out whether it's, you know, case design, just our expertise from being in the industry for so long. We want to help drive business through new channels.
All right, so Taylor, I'm going to go back to you. You've been in the industry now about 5 years, about to hit your 5-year anniversary. So how aware are investors of the opportunity to invest in a life settlement fund, and how has that changed over your 5 years?
Yeah, I can't believe it's almost been 5 years. November 4th, it was like election day, I remember. So when I first started, I would say a lot of the initial prospective investor conversations were really heavily focused on 101 efforts. Like, this is a life settlement, this is how it works, let's get to the basics. That's what a lot of the marketing decks that we were putting together were focused on. I would say fast forward to today, where people are coming to the table with a foundation. They have an understanding of life settlements. They've explored it before, but it wasn't the right time for them to invest. They're coming in at a deeper level, and we're able to engage them and meet them there with some deeper materials than historical. So it's exciting to see.
And so if you looked at the scale of awareness, of how much time you spend on awareness versus selling, has that shifted over time as well?
Big time, but I would say there's still a huge focus on awareness, education efforts. We spend a lot of our time doing continuing education webinars, getting out there at conferences, getting the word out. But yeah, I would say it's shifted a little bit away from the awareness.
Great. Well, Clay, I want to just delve a little deeper in some of the things you started to say. So you're working with, you know, large financial institutions, and how's the reception and the perception and the receptivity of life settlements changing, and how you approach the market? How's it with your clients, and how they approach the market, right?
Right. I'm optimistic about it. It's really what got me excited after my previous career in the space to join Daniel Zeppelin, my partner, and my 2 other partners, Tama and Larry, to explore into this venture. Because I said, look, if we're gonna be a broker in this space, we need to do something that's a little different. We need to go find a new channel, right? And luckily, I was able to land in a spot with Daniel, who had already had pre-existing relationships with a lot of these financial institutions. So it seemed like a very seamless fit for us to really increase the brokerage side into these financial institutions. So there was a bit of a warm foot into the door. So maybe I'm a little skewed on on some of that optimism. But really, the conversation is they're curious about it. So I said curious is one of my three points. Is they're curious about it. I think the wind is at our back as an industry, and it has been for quite some time. And it always feels like we're still just trying to grab the wind at our back and ride it, and we just haven't quite gotten there yet. But the positive news is when we go in and we talk about life settlements, the stigma of kind of the early aughts and years past is really gone. I mean, the black eyes of news and press releases from many years ago is now made its way down Google search list, and so a lot of the financial institutions are aware of it. They don't they don't quite understand it. There's a lot of misunderstanding or misconceptions about it, but those conversations are shifting. I think really a lot of the financial institutions thought this is not for my client, right? That might have an ultra high net worth client. This isn't for them. Life settlements are for clients that are distressed or they need money now or whatever it may be, and we say no. And we educate them about how it needs to become a sophisticated planning tool. Like, it doesn't fit for everyone, right? It doesn't fit for every need, but this is how it should fit in, and this is a process that makes that work. And we're on track. We're on track to really become the premier and exclusive broker for a lot of these financial institutions, and they understand from a fiduciary standpoint what it means to do that. And the conversations are a lot more open. And I know you said there's still a lot more education that we have to do. In fact, we spend most of our time educating instead of selling deals, it feels like. But at least the conversation has shifted to, we know about it, we think we understand it, tell us more, and how can we roll it out to our advisory network? And so that to me is exciting.
And do you think that's driven by fiduciary regulations, responsibilities, or just by the industry maturing and more comfort from previous experiences?
I mean, the fiduciary duty and role and responsibility, I mean, that gets thrown around a lot. But I think at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're providing an exit ramp for a no longer needed and no longer wanted product. And it really kind of fits in seamlessly with their estate planning design or whatever they're trying to do. It's another arrow in the quiver for the asset manager to show their clients that they're really thinking about their estate as a whole or their life insurance policies, because usually life insurance policies within the estate or within the trust or whatever it may be is kind of just set it and forget it, right? So when these advisors say, well, now let's look at that, there's a path for this. Not only is it re-engage them on whether it's working for their needs, but it also opens the conversation of life settlements. And so really educating at that point to the advisors about that's what we need to look for, and that's the conversation that needs to be had, I think is the most impactful from an awareness standpoint that we have seen at Treyled. Like it, and case study after case study. Once you do one deal within a financial institution, they talk about it to all their buddies. They talk about it to all their friends. Look how smart I am. Look how great this was for the client. That catches like wildfire and works its way up to the top. They continue to bring us in, and it's grown and grown. And I think that's why at Treyled, we're bringing some of the more unique paper to the market. And because it's truly policies that were used for the estate planning purpose. It wasn't just sold to sell. It was actually sold for a need. They no longer have it. So that's why they're good, efficient contracts.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to segue to Perry here, but I think one of the problems has been over the years, you get a client in the door, and then they go to sell a policy, and it's like 6 months, 9 months later, they're finally sold, and people are frustrated by the process. So Perry, my question to you is, how has the process improved? Where there's still the improvements, and how does that play a role in bringing more advisors into the business? And I know you don't do much on the DTC, but obviously that would have an impact there as well.
Sure, and actually this is something Clay and I chatted about a little bit last night, and as well as Daniel, his partner. For us, we always keep in mind the investor, the fund is the client, but we still want to give their client a good experience. And so we know there's certain things that we can't control, and a lot of those happen before the case even comes to us. There may be challenges obtaining medical records. there may be challenges getting the client to come to the table with we hear the phrase family dynamic more than we'd like to. But essentially, we are at the point where the average policy that we're seeing and settling is 16 years old. So you've got kind of a double whammy there. It's 16 years of information to gather and a lot more chain of title and divorce issues. We're not looking at difficult policies. We're looking at difficult title history. And I think just kind of making sure everybody's on the same page for how that process works while simultaneously figuring out with our clients, okay, what's a must-have, what's a nice-to-have, and what's a trailing item. I think that's really a big focus on that we can bring to the table and kind of make the consumer experience more favorable while still having a good eye on diligence and providing a good investment-grade product.
And I think as a provider, I mean, I sit in that role as well, and you can agree or disagree with me, but we also tend to have more of a focus on really that so many of these policies are being sold again in the tertiary market. And so I think both the initial buyers from the provider and the provider themselves are focused on, okay, well, if this is going to resell, maybe this first person's okay skipping these three things, but it's going to come back, so let's just deal with it now. Do you experience
I
that?
completely agree. And I think that started coming up more, call it 7-8 years ago. That's a question I never really had in the very old days, but it became a much, much more common thing. You would have a diligence review a second time around and kind of get called to the carpet on, hey, why didn't you check this? And fortunately at Maple, being so thorough, that was less common with us. But we would review a lot of tertiary sales that, it was more than just doing a VOC and a quick check. There's that whole title history or background to run down. So that has definitely become a much bigger part of the puzzle.
Clay, any thoughts on that vis-a-vis your clients that you work with on the process? Better, worse, improving? What are the most important things to work on?
Yeah, I mean, sure, I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I think
any of them you can tell us?
Yeah, sure. I think
do they involve
look, I'll take a
words,
different
or?
approach. I'll talk about our process on the front end, and I think the blocking and tackling that we can do on the front end. I mean, we do life settlements every day, right? So we've seen it all, we've done it all. So asking for that information up front is always very helpful. And so we're lucky and we're blessed that we're in a situation where we generally have complete and utter control to the end client. So getting and FaceTiming with them, there's not a lot of agents per se that are involved in the middle of the transaction that we're trying to get information from the family. So to me, getting all that information up front has been super helpful to the process. I mean, we just did a case. I think it just funded today. We did it in 30 days. Now, we got lucky. We got lucky in the fact that the carrier changed forms in like a couple of days, right? So. But I do think now, obviously, getting the information from the front end is super helpful, and getting it all, because the last thing the clients want to do, especially with our clients in the high net worth space, is they don't want a large homework assignments, right? So if we can try to get it all up front, get it all done once, it's super helpful to the process, super helpful to the providers. And the other is, I do feel like the carriers are becoming a little bit more responsive. I'm sure people have their difference of opinions on that. I see Sam going. Yeah. But I'm speaking from a couple of years ago. At Magna, it just felt like we were always banging our head against the wall, trying to get our deals processed. I kind of feel like they're a lot more receptive. We have good relationships on the insurance side because of Daniel's previous business in the insurance, or his insurance business helps us along there, and I think that's a compliment to our business. But on my end, I think the carriers seem to be a bit more responsive.
I was actually going to ask, and when you brought that up,
Yeah.
if you're not dealing with the agent of record as often,
Yeah.
not to ask for the secret sauce, but are you finding it's easier to deal with the family, the wealth advisor, the carrier directly through your relationships? That's something I'm very curious about.
Absolutely. I think not to hate on agents, but a lot of times they just get in the middle and screw up the deal. Right, like they want to try to add more value than they really can add.
Yeah, I wanted you to say that, but yes,
I
agree.
Yeah, and so they can, and we're lucky and we're fortunate in a position to where we're generally dealing with an asset manager that's going to take that wealth and redeploy it, and a better need for the family to grow at a better rate. And so we don't have a lot of interactions with the agents, and we deal directly with the family and provide a white glove service directly to the high net worth client through their advisor. And that advisor generally is the most trusted source that they have. And that's, so they say, look, if you believe in Treyled and the advisor says this is, who we should deal with, that trust and that transparency is already built. It's already there, and it's absolutely very helpful in the process.
Taylor, as a fund manager, what's your perspective on this?
And the life settlement process?
Yes.
I'd say I have a pretty optimistic view on the process in that technology is starting to catch pace with what we're doing. So just in terms of some of the partnerships we've formed with their access to technology and being able to get medical records faster, more often, keep our paper up to date so that we can be opportunistic both on the selling and buying side. We've definitely seen huge advancements over the last year in that sense, in terms of the life settlement process. I can't speak much to the origination side, like these guys.
Great. Okay, I'm going to do another around the horn. Perry, I'll start with you. So each of you has experience looking for origination opportunities, whether it's secondary or tertiary, but looking for potential life settlements. Get your perspective on the stakeholders you deal with when you're looking for new opportunities. How aware are they of life settlement at the outset?
So generally speaking, on the capital side, what I'm seeing, and I find this very interesting, is we're seeing capital come into us and discuss the asset class through a few different sources, right? We're seeing not only folks who are curious about the market from, the direct-to-consumer commercials and the increased awareness on the consumer side. Abacus being public has obviously brought a lot more awareness to the industry as well. We're seeing people who are coming in, possibly from the family office side with a couple $1 million to spend and talking to us directly. We're generally not finding that to be the best fit for us, but it's interesting to get those calls where I wasn't getting them a few years ago. I'd also say we're seeing market re-entrants. People who had been in the space 10, 15, 20 years ago asking about what's going on. People who haven't done secondary market transactions in a while saying, hey, what's flow looking like? Can you get us some data? Can you let us know the state of the industry, where we haven't had that conversation in several years as well? So, I think it's very curious. I think the more I think about that, that's really a great word. We are seeing a lot of people that are coming in with a decent level of awareness, whether new or existing, and I think that's been a net positive.
Yeah, I would agree with the re-entrant point you make. I've seen the same thing as of late, last 3 to 6 months, and I think that's an encouraging sign. Honestly, I do.
Absolutely.
Clay?
Yeah, sure. I think I hit on it a little bit earlier, but maybe to clarify some of those points is the conversation's definitely getting easier. Advisors, CPA, trust attorneys have now heard about it. They're now, I wouldn't say well-versed in it by any means, but, what they don't understand, let me not get into what they don't understand just yet, but the encouraging part is, yes, there's a lot more awareness that's been out there about it. They're a lot more curious about it. And the other thing that we're seeing is there's the FOMO. There's like the fear of missing out, right? So if one financial institution is now doing this and it's starting to become a little more mainstream within this particular office, whether it's a particular Houston office or a Chicago office, wherever it may be, it starts to spread. And so that's encouraging. So when I talk about, word of mouth and case studies and having great examples to go and share and say, well, your other office in Chicago did this, y'all need to be doing it in Houston or wherever it may be, that's resonating. And they've already kind of heard the success story throughout the office or through a sister office. And so to me that's encouraging. We no longer get the oh, well, we would never do a life settlement, and we don't talk about that here, or we've had maybe we've had a bad, everyone seems to be curious about it. I mean, it's very interesting. Daniel tells a great story, and I love it. And I hope this perception changes, and I feel that it is. He goes, okay, well, how many in the room have heard of a life settlement? A lot of hands go up. How many of you have done a life settlement? And maybe 10, 15 hands go up in the room. Okay, well, of the 10 to 15 hands that went up in the room, how many of you enjoyed the process or enjoyed the experience? Every one of them goes down.
Right.
You know? And I think now I think we're at a point with our industry and the way that we've been doing it, and the real players that are playing in this space have longevity to them, and they've been doing it for a long enough time that I think we have, I'll say, the wind at our back to where when you talk about the experience of doing a life settlement, it's generally more on the positive side than it is the negative. And so that's what I'm starting to see, and that's it. And to me, that's important. It's one of the first times I've seen it since I've been doing this for 17 years. So
Great. Taylor?
Again, different perspective here, but just to piggyback on some of the thoughts I had listening, CFP put out a report recently that actually continuing education credit courses that are insurance asset focused have the highest adoption rates by the people that attend those continuing education courses. So I think there's a huge opportunity for the agent advisor channel to start feeling more enthusiastic about that, the life settlement transaction process, and bringing that to their clients if they feel they have the tools they need to make it efficient, worthwhile, bring value. But in terms of origination from the asset manager side, I'd say we're seeing direct to consumer through some good partners, Q Capital being one of them. And that's driving more of the smaller, mid-size face value policies. Broker channels slowed down a little bit, but we're definitely leaning into that for the bigger face value policies. So still seeing some traction, but the market has slowed a little, but we're encouraged.
Great, thank you. Another around the horn question, the age-old life settlement industry question. What's the state of capital in the industry compared to the opportunity available? Thoughts? Perry, you're on. You chose the bad seat. You get to go first every time.
You know, I think what we keep hearing is that the challenge has been tied to interest rates. So that's where kind of my optimism lies, is that I think we are at an inflection point where that is just the uncertainty tells me it's going to be going in the right direction for capital raising soon. Knock on wood, at least I hope that's going to be the case. Yeah, I think that's been the primary driver of, if you look at the timing, a few people started to say, I think it was early 23, hey, this is going to be an issue because I'm aware of Fund X being at the end of their fund life or not having much to spend, and you can see the writing on the wall. And I'll be honest, through kind of that early, we had an excellent start to 23. We saw it, but we didn't really want to acknowledge it. So, our slowdown kind of happened very tail end of 23 going into 24, and that's why I say, last year was a difficult year after several years of growth. I think the tide is going in the right direction. I think just the conversations we've been having are much greater. And then also just from a policy flow perspective, I know I've left that more to Clay, but if I look at policy counts that are coming in, since we are so broker focused, if even with that kind of hyper focus on one subset of the industry, we are seeing the policy counts rise there as well.
Clay?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the answer to the age-old question that I always get when I ask that question is, well, we're raising capital and we'll start deploying it in November. I don't know why it's always November. I don't know why. Maybe y'all can tell me. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's clearly been a slowdown in the capital and the market, we keep hearing and talking, and people are going to start redeploying capital, or they're going to start raising capital. But if I'm being truthful about how I feel the position is, the secondary market, and I'll primarily talk about the secondary market. I'm not entirely sure about the tertiary market. Is that it's soft. I mean, we bring a little bit of a different policy to market. So I think our average face size is like $8 million, and the average spend is closer to $2 million. So that's a pretty big spend in the secondary market, right? So we might be a little bit more impacted or see first sight of the slowdown of capital compared to maybe some other groups, the direct-to-consumer, right, the smaller spends, the smaller face. So to us, it seems like we're originating really good contracts, and I'm having to beg for groups to get us there. We usually get there, but it's been a little bit harder of a path to try to get the true value out of these files than it has been, in years past. And obviously, I hope that changes because from our standpoint, it's the chicken and the egg. It's, hey, we're creating all this awareness, we're creating all this origination, but is the capital going to be there to deploy? I mean, we get a couple $1 million for a policy is a hefty spend, but that's the cases that we're bringing to market, and that's the cases that need to be that should and need to be absorbed and sold. The other question I have is there's a ton of tertiary buyers out there that are not being active in the secondary market, and that bothers me. That confuses me. I mean, maybe it's aggregation. They don't want to deal with the noise of the auction, whatever it may be. But the secondary market, to me, I'm not going to get in yield compression compared to tertiary market because I'm not as active in the tertiary market. But I can tell you in the secondary market, if you're a buyer and you're in this market today and you're tertiary and you're not doing secondary, you should consider secondary. There's a lot of good buys out there that need to be absorbed. And so that's my little pitch on secondary market. Get in the market, get active.
Cash now.
We need you guys. We need you guys. Yeah, cash now.
Taylor.
Put simply, I think capital is the tide that rises all boats for the entire market, every participant here. So if more capital comes in the door, we can put more capital to work. More capital being put to work in the space gives everyone else here a job. So that's how I view it.
So follow up to that, Taylor, question for you. What is the state of fundraising, of capital raising in today's environment?
Yeah, so it's been set up here a little bit slower. So in terms of interest rates, we're at like 4.25, and we're expecting some more easing, so that may help. But we're going up against fixed income. And then if you're looking at some reports that have recently been put out by like Preqin and McKinsey, the flows into private credit have been strong, but like private equity, other alternative asset classes have seen a bit of a slowdown. Especially, I think Preqin put out 2021, 2022 was kind of the high, and this year hasn't been as strong. And McKinsey 2016, this is the lowest fundraising that's occurred since 2016. So there's capital out there, but it's more selective. I think people who have capital are being a little bit more picky of where they're allocating, and we're definitely seeing that. People are coming in with deeper due diligence, they're reassessing the space, they're taking their time, making sure that it's a true fit in the portfolio. And not only that, kind of going off of what I said earlier, but if they're more informed about the space, they're coming in and now assessing which manager does it best, or which manager takes a specific strategy that would fit within their time horizons of their investments. So that's the general state.
Great. So Clay, just following up from something you said, I think I know the answer, what you're saying, but buyers or sellers market today from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a buyer's market. I mean, there's good buys. I think to add on to what she's saying, I think even on our side, the sophistication of the buyer in today's market, not just from an investor getting to the asset, but the buyer of the policy, the institutional investor, they are sitting on the sidelines a little bit more, and they're sharpening their pencils, and they're getting a little smarter on their data and their analytics. And so it feels like there's a little bit of sideline watching right now. And so it seems to me that there's conversations that are like, why aren't people buying these policies that they used to buy up pretty regularly at the yield that we used to see them at? And some of it's a slowdown of capital, and some of it is they haven't redeployed their new fund yet. But I think a lot of it is the market's kind of gotten a little quieter in the buy, and they've tried to take that time to really fine-tune the art of what they're looking at, whether it's with AI or data science. A lot of these groups are moving in-house with their underwriting. They're not really just relying on life expectancies anymore. And so from our perspective as a broker that relies on life expectancies and market life expectancies, we might see it a little different, and so those conversations are being had. Oh, our internal came in longer, all that kind of stuff. So I've never heard of many internals that came in shorter, but I'm sure they're out there, guys. So.
And Perry, I want to grab one thing to hear your thoughts. Clay talked about, tertiary players should be looking at secondary. For your typical client, if there is such a thing, what did you say the mix is of what they're buying, secondary versus tertiary?
Yeah, I'd say for us it's heavy secondary, probably extremely heavy as far as 90%. If I'm involved from the provider side, just being completely honest, with us being a regulated arm of the transaction, a lot of the tertiary stuff will be handled directly by the client. We don't get in the middle unless we're asked to diligence or provide some pricing support, unless it's a single policy, right? The blocks don't always flow through me. So I would say there is some of that activity that we just simply aren't part of. In terms of what we market and in terms of what we're directly involved in, I'd say it's 90 to 95% secondary, 5 to 10 tertiary.
Got it. Okay, segue a little bit, and the prior panel talked a bit about data, so I want to touch on that for a minute. And Taylor, start with you. Like, how does data and access to data drive market awareness, growth potential, capital raising? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think really looking at the life settlement industry, we need to pivot from, at least from the asset manager's perspective, awareness to a level of professionalism. And what I mean by that is, previously I came from GCM Grosvenor. It's an $86 billion asset manager shop out of Chicago. And a lot of what drove investor participation there wasn't just the marketing, the PR, the things we heard about this morning. It was more so the completeness of the data sets that investors had at their, they were exposed to. So they had things to compare against, they had things to analyze and assess the opportunities before them. So I think data in the life settlement side is, it would be great and maybe aspirational. Maybe I seem like a little too aspirational, but if we could get a life settlement index just with fund manager performance to benchmark and show investors, this is my strategy versus other strategies in the space, and have a unified reporting mechanism to show this is what the space does historically. This is what we've done. It could be anonymized. It could be, we could go about it in different ways, but just getting that reporting and starting to work as a unified group instead of super competitive against one another, and kind of come together and say, an index would be worthwhile. So that's one example of how data, while not awareness in the PR, marketing, advertising sense, that awareness would drive a lot of participation, in my view.
And transparency, right?
And transparency.
And what kind of metric? Is it just pure return? Is it, how would you think about this index? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, I think return would be a big one. I mean, that's the main driver of what people are looking for, is the return profile. But with return, also risk. People are constantly trying to weigh their portfolios and look at it from a risk perspective as well, especially the institution. So I think all of that would come into play.
And that's the basic, as far as the data that the investors you guys approach, that's kind of the base level of what their expectations are?
I would say so. I mean, I think it would help the conversation. A lot of the onus is put on the asset manager to put this data together themselves. Go out there, search and find in various databases on what access they can find in various fact sheets or reporting databases, and it would just be nice if we could go to one centralized spot.
Great. Well, look, I think Rob talked about it before, but all the members here know, and all the providers know, that Lisa, for the last, how many years is it now? 5? 5 years, has done a data collection project from the providers that's based on the secondary market transactions. And I believe every Lisa member's participated, and most, if not all, of the non-members have participated to help us understand the size and scope of the secondary market. But we're only capturing part of it, and I think, and I was involved as a board member in that as well, and I think there have been, it was alluded to earlier, but maybe this is a project Lisa should take on for data collection from asset managers, which could discuss tertiary transactions. And I don't know, Brian, I'm sure you would do it in a way that would be anonymous, just like it was done with the providers, but getting that data, it would seem to be helpful, as you're saying it, for the managers going out to raise money. And if capital raises the tide and lifts all ships, that would be good for all of us. So what kind of, tertiary, we could talk about returns. I mean, there's a lot. We could start, as Rob said, it was 4 data points in that first one. Well, we wanted 80. And we're up to, yeah. And we're how many data points now? 8, 10? Not that many? 5? I thought we added more than that. But, well, I think it's Lisa-led effort. Maybe Taylor, if maybe there's a board committee that could be formed that we could start looking at that. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get back to that. I'll push that one more time. All right, Perry, for the provider perspective, what are you seeing from on the capital side?
Currently we're very fortunate to have several capital sources we've worked with for several years. That's pockets are deep and they're still actively buying. To Clay's point, we definitely are seeing scenarios where, let's be honest, they know there's a more limited market. If something takes a while to underwrite, if somebody wants to kind of feel out where the market is, if somebody wants to price things a few different ways, or knowing that a policy copy or another document may be trickling in or additional meds may be trickling in, it feels like there's, with rare exception, a reason to jump on a case right out of the gates. Actually, our parent company does that a lot more often than others because they can jump on cases before meds are in or anything else, right? So, we try to capitalize on both sides. There's cases where we see an opportunity to move very quickly on certain cases, and we have strong capital for that approach. And then others where, we know there's going to be more of an auction process, a drawn-out data collection process. But from just a pure capital perspective, I think they're pretty pleased overall with the policy flow. Obviously we're not the only ones filling those coffers. There's flow from other providers and the tertiary market as well. So I think there is a decent volume right now. But I would definitely say what we have a challenge with is we know we have certain buckets for, hey, this is a case we'll be competitive on. There's other subsets where, longer life expectancy term conversions. More cash-heavy indexed IUL policies. There's subsets that we don't have a home for, and that's where we really want to focus our efforts on, kind of to the point of the market reentrance. If people are looking for a way to get back in, yes, you can compete on yield, but there's also a lot of policies that are coming in that just aren't getting the attention that I think, we can really serve a niche and kind of work with the brokerage community and figure out how some of these policies can find a better home. I think that's our biggest focus on the capital side is, how do we bid on more of the policies that come in? How do we turn the cool leads into warmer leads?
Okay, I'm going to stick with you for a minute because you and I have something in common. We both, you more recently than I, have been through ownership transitions. And how has that impacted, and does that, the traditional provider role change? How has that impacted your business, and has that helped or maybe caused some obstacles that you had to overcome?
Yeah, it's been great so far. So our acquisition was about 3 months ago, coincidentally on my birthday. So nice birthday gift. But I think with the fact that our parent company is doing something different than the traditional asset manager or investor, there hasn't really been much conflict. And I can actually kind of go back and say I was very optimistic that would be the case because when we were owned by Reservoir Capital, they kind of had the same mindset. When the market was all chasing 75 plus insureds with 21st and AVS LEs, they said, how do we focus on some younger insureds, chase some Fasanos, and try to find and build a portfolio out of that? That's one of the funds I can say performed very well, even at a difficult time for the market when there were LE extensions and Stoli. We worked with a parent company that had one strategy, but still had other fund clients that did very different things. And it's been a nice mix.
Great. Clay,
Sure.
you see it from your perspective, lines being blurred. I mean, how does it impacted how you guys operate?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of consolidation in the space over the last couple of years, and I helped lead some of that charge with Vita acquiring Magna. I think one of the things.
What year was that? 2006, 7? It was a long time ago,
Yes,
right?
I think somewhere it all blurs together. I think one of the benefits of it is the fact that these providers are working hand in glove with the institutional investors that own them. So there's quicker decisions that can be made from a pricing and a bidding standpoint, because it's all kind of done in house now. So from my perspective as a broker, that's very helpful. Right, we're not having to, there's communication that's obviously going on inside the company that's being relayed to us. That's not through telephone; it's through face-to-face conversations and through meetings. So it's positive that the consolidation in the market is happening with certain asset managers. I do worry that there's, for lack of a better term, I'm not exactly sure what to call it, but there's few and far between merchant providers out there that are really working with multiple funds. I know Maple obviously does, even though they've been vertically integrated across most of the strategies. So different compared to others. I think that obviously will work well for you guys, or at least I hope it does. Right? So yeah, I mean, there is some concern that most of this consolidation has happened and the institutional investors are gobbling up their own providers and what that world kind of looks like. But I think the role of the provider's changed. Like, the role of the provider is changed. It's a lot more data analytics. It's a lot more case design. There's a lot more going on there. And I think the role of the broker's changed. I mean, we're not really just intermediaries in a process running an auction anymore. I mean, if you are, then it's a dying business. I mean, we're really going out there. It's education, it's awareness, it's really working through the shadow accounts, the NLG, really communicating with the clients and the advisors on the front end about what it looks like. I mean, these are all good changes. So consolidation does happen in more efficient spaces. And so I think that's where we're getting. I encourage it to some point. It frustrates me on others when it comes to my own personal business, but I think it's necessary in the growth of our space.
All right, I'm about to get a bunch of dirty looks, mostly from that part of the room, but probably over here too. Well, we can't talk about capital raising and talking to investors without talking about LEs. So Taylor, how would you characterize LEs in today's market, and how does that impact talking to investors or investors' perception of our market?
Oh boy, you want to start with me?
Yeah, I had to let Perry
switching
off
up
this
the order
time.
on the LE question. All right, I like it. My thoughts I'll be brief. I think life expectancies will always be part art and part science if we stay at the current pace. At AIR, we like to take a blended approach when we can to reduce kind of like the individual model-based perspective in making our decisions. So I think there's room for growth in the LEs, but that's as far as I'll go. This is a little technical for my role.
Clay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, life expectancies are a large part of what we do as a broker, and to your point, they very much have a place in this space, and it has a very important role. I know that most of the funds out there are using internals that maybe they necessarily, or maybe they're relying more on than just the traditional LEs or an LE blend, but they need it for mark-to-market purposes. I think in our role in the situation in which we do is we have to have a very good understanding of what the buyer's buy box is, what LEs kind of make them tick, which ones go. So we have to be strategic. It's not just give them the lowest LE anymore, right? Like, right. It's really like what LE is the most meaningful and most impactful. Like, the number could be a little higher, but they're going to rely on it a lot more. And if I throw out two together that don't really work for that fund, which I know is probably going to be the most aggressive capital in that case because of particular reasons as to why they like it, maybe it's younger, cancer, whatever it may be. So the LE game has changed. It's evolved, and you have to be a lot more strategic about what you buy and which ones you buy. That's going to get the most looks and be the most well received as opposed to just the lowest life expectancies anymore. So I'll leave it at that.
Perry, chime in.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always found interesting is a few years ago how little information on an LE report the average buyer would use. They'd look at the number in months and be done, which I thought was crazy. So when I would have conversations with a broker, hey, what does your internal look like? I'd speak in terms of a multiplier, and it's like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
Pick your LE company, right? So I think having a deeper understanding than just how many months long is the life expectancy. You have which report are you using? What does the narrative look like? What, if it's a clinical, what does the prognosis look like? Do you have all the medical records to make an informed decision? So I pretty much agree. LEs are an important part, but they're a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle.
Yeah, and I would agree with the huge improvements on the data that we get on those reports, that people are able to, again, it's an opinion. It's not the law, and people can use that data to put into their model or to make as part of their assessment. So Perry, I want to go back to you again. I go back to something that was mentioned, I think, by both you and Clay, which is kind of a little bit of a slower secondary market. But today's secondary market is tomorrow's tertiary market, and if there is no secondary market today, the future of the tertiary market is going to slow down with some lag. So talk to me today. The products that are out there today seem to be different than the products we were buying 10 years ago. Just kind of your thoughts on what the secondary market, as far as product base, and how that looks to set up the tertiary or impact the tertiary market in the future.
Yeah, so based on what's been purchased over the past few years, I still think we have a pretty healthy mix. Like I said, average policy we've purchased on the secondary side in recent years is about 16 years old. So we are still seeing a lot of really strong low COI products from when carriers were extremely competitive, really nice NLG products that people can figure out, not just min funding down to the bone, but some different strategies within the shadow account. So I think tertiary is going to remain robust just because of the quality of paper that's been bought. I think it's skewed smaller on average. So I think you're going to see more in terms of block sales versus single policy sales. Kind of forecasting out a little further to your exact question on products, I think what's difficult is the products insurance carriers are issuing now are getting more complex. They're not just a beautifully designed pay a min monthly, or even if you've missed your min monthly, catch it up. That's a thing of the past. It's complicated index products that are being sold and explained differently. And a big piece of it is term insurance. The conversion products aren't getting better. They're getting significantly worse. True. Maybe a best case scenario is they're getting simpler, like a Transamerica or somebody just defaulting to a level premium and level death benefit. Those will get bought and those will be around, but some of the really, really high COI products or really convoluted ones, they'll be a lot more difficult to sell if you miss your mark on the life expectancy.
Great. All right, Taylor, I'm going to pivot back to marketing, your wheelhouse. Is there a strategy that's out there that is the center of the fairway for this industry, whether it's for all the stakeholders to increase awareness, as we kind of bring this back to the original topic?
I think what was talked about this morning was extremely interesting and useful for this industry. I loved things just as simple as changing some terminology to connect with the human element a little bit more. Like the word settlement in itself is like, ooh, I'm settling, So there are things we can address, and I loved what they were digging in on how AI has entered the playbook on digital marketing. Spending time on people's websites now, having an FAQ page so that AI can come in and read responses to predetermined questions that you're putting out there for them to read, has now taken the place of putting specific keywords out there. So getting that language aligned as an industry as a whole is probably the answer to your question. But driving awareness is really audience specific. I'd say my answer would be different if I was talking direct to consumer, direct to agent or advisor, or investors. That all of it is a little slightly tweaked on how to drive awareness of life settlements.
Yeah, I thought I would agree with you. I think that the talk, the prior panel was great, and I had just jotted down 4 points in no particular order from that, which I think I would agree with you depending on your audience. It's specific, but these 4 kind of seemed like they would go across any stakeholder: transparency, third-party validations, that's like testimonials, and coordination of messaging. I think those were, we see messaging all over the place, and those, I said third-party validation and testimonials. I counted that as 2 for some reason, but
Yeah.
those are my 4. But I think that you're right. Like there are themes amongst those, but I think those 3 or 4 core things could go across any of those stakeholders.
Yeah, just to comment on that, from the investor perspective, I just read Deloitte's Trust and Alternatives survey, and this again is coming from the investor side, but they value data and third-party validation higher than brand or awareness. So that just underscores a lot of what's been set up here, of the need for index data or that level of understanding.
Well, I did have a note to myself to bring it back to data collection reminder. Let's not forget that. We don't have much time left, so we'll open for questions. But before we do that, I just want to ask each of you expectations for 2026. I won't limit you to 3 words, though. You can say as many words as you want, but expectations for 2026.
So for me and the Maple team, I think the biggest piece is really integration with our new parent. How do we do things more seamlessly with our existing clients, and how do we leverage some of the experience they've had from doing things a little different from us, and really bring that together. So that's priority number 1 is that integration piece, and number 2 is just kind of continuing the growth. I think the best thing Clay said from a standpoint of what we all do is it's so heavy on the case design, and as I think about how things funnel up, an advisor may see 1 case a year, a GA may see 5, a broker may see 50, a provider may see 2,000, and a fund may see 4,000. As much data as we can collect and really work on fine-tuning the things that are becoming more and more important to build a case, to drive organic growth through the channels we work with, I think that's kind of the second piece for us as well.
Great. Clay?
Yeah, I think for myself and the Treyled team, we're really excited about the next year. We've made, while we'd always like to originate more, we're originating, a fair amount, and we'll continue to grow that. I think for us, this year was really critical and important to growing enterprise value for our firm within financial institutions, and really kind of getting more downstream within organizations. And a lot of that has been done by the continued education and precisely telling advisors and agents what to look for when it comes to life settlements. We've all done this before, and we've opened up the floodgate, and we've gotten 12 to 15 policies, and none of them work for a life settlement. And then they go, well, this is BS. Like this nobody buys anything in this space. So to be so precise about what is an executable contract within life settlements, and have the advisors and the advisory team from the top down look for that, has been critical this last year in really growing within our platform within these organizations. And so we're super excited about that, and I hope that the alignment of capital is there to meet the secondary needs that we're going to be able to bring to market. So if I had to say what's the one thing that kind of keeps me awake at night, it's, hey, we're pounding this drum, and if the floodgates open, is there capital there to be able to actually execute on this? Yeah.
Great. Taylor?
I would say measured growth and scalable systems. And what I mean by that is a lot of the points that these 2 just raised, but strong integration between teams, data, using AI where you can to make processes more efficient, but also going out to market and raising some of that capital. So we're excited at AIR.
Great. Any questions out here? Yep. Nate?
Yeah, it sounds generally a very positive kind of sentiment on the roadmap to success for increasing awareness. What are some threats that individuals in the room running their own businesses should focus on avoiding, or just as an industry in general, to kind of derail all of the good work, all of the consistency that we've done over the last 10 or 15 years, to kind of continue on the path and not have any missteps?
I'll take a quick stab and then let Clay take the rest. I think what people should avoid is
my mic went off.
I think what people should avoid is stagnation. Like you said, we've had 10 to 15 years of doing things. Doesn't mean we always have to do it the same way. So I think, one of the things this industry doesn't always talk about is what can we do. There's not always a lot of new and exciting ideas. So I think to the extent that people can, really focus on the future rather than what did we do in the past that made us a ton of money 10 years ago, I don't think that always works for everybody. I think it's what's new.
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. We've done a pretty good job in the last 10, 15 years of avoiding like a black eye as far as the industry goes. I have a lot of thoughts on it because I've personally been involved with it, that the infighting within organizations, within not just the industry, but also within LISA, needs to stop. Litigation is a part of business sometimes, but also so is looking people in the eye and talking to them about issues, concerns, and problems. So I think that type of press within the industry is not helpful. Because we see it, we walk into meetings and we have to squash those concerns, right? So to me, I don't know. I mean, if Lisa has a platform that we can try to work these things out, maybe before things get elevated and mediated. But I don't think that's helpful for the industry, and I think the industry is big enough for all of us, especially if we look in non-traditional distribution channels and really try to grow in areas where all of us aren't, fishing in the same pond. There's just so many ponds to fish in. Go find a new pond.
And I will add one point, which is I think innovation is key. And as an industry, and I know this sounds so generic because everyone just talks about AI all the time, but we have so much data. We collect enormous amounts of data, and I still feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg of actually analyzing and using what we can learn from that data. So I think that's going to be very important for that innovation and for that performance as we move forward and helping the industry grow, because I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg there, and it's going to help on the front end, it's going to help in the middle, and it's going to help on upstream in the back end. So it's really can help anywhere in the process, whether it's from finding policies, understanding cases that work, to attracting investors because you have data that you can prove why your business model works or why you're selecting those policies. So I think that's a huge thing. I know are there any more questions? I know we're the only thing between you and lunch, so that might lower some hands. If no other questions, I'd like to thank the panelists. Great discussion.